Hello, hello, hello. And in this video, I'm joined again by International Master Yuri Orlov, and we will be talking about the very exciting theme of smashing the Pirc defense like a bug. I'd like to point out also that my fan is very loud today, and I just can't get it to stop. So it'll be going off the whole time. And pardon the interruption, I just can't get it to. And so I'm just looking into all sorts of different things. I got to cover my heat vent, and all right, take it away.
Well, today is a very interesting subject of the Pirc defense. I think that's the right way to say it because in the United States and most Europe, it's known as Pirc defense, but it's not really Pirc. It's actually Pirc.
Huh.
It's the grandmaster from former Yugoslavia. I'm not sure, Croatia or Serbia. And his name was Vasip Pirc. He came up with this defense
There's like a Z in there.
1930s. It's like it's more like almost Z than like his spelling is a little bit weird, like
weird.
P-I-R-C, Pirc. Well, it's not Pirc, it's Pirc.
Huh.
So that's the right way to say it. And the idea of the defense is he's basically letting you control the center, but intends to attack it. And the another variation here is that I actually do myself play fairly often is C6. That's actually Ufimtsev defense, or some other names exist like Czech defense or whatnot. So there's a variety of disputes on who authored what and whatnot. But as far as Pirc is concerned, that's his defense here, G6. So black makes a fianchetto, and eventually ends up with something like either C6, B5, or C6, knight D7, E5, or A6, B5, bishop B7. So there's a variety of flank plays here that black does. The upside is a fairly strong castling position. The downside is obviously when you give up space to your opponent, be prepared that they're going to take space and attack you with it. Not a very easy system to play, and a lot of people get confused here. They don't really know what to do. Some people play bishop d3. Some immediately get afraid of the pin and play h3. I've seen a fair number of characters playing bishop c4 here, bishop e3, bishop f4, bishop g4. So there's just a variety of things that people do here.
And that sort of adds to the appeal for the Pirc players, that there are just so many different things that can occur and so much room for freedom and personal choice and everything.
Yeah, that's definitely, there's just a tremendous number of opportunities here. So generally speaking, all of this stuff foils into maybe I would say 4 categories. One is a classical system that usually is played like this. Now, where white actually just simply castles kingside, doesn't challenge black all at once, and eventually, depending on what black does, for instance, knight d7 is a very popular move. C6 actually is probably more precise. Bishop g4 is what they call a main variation. This has been played gazillion times, and white can play d5, queen d2, and so on. So that's one system. Not superbly challenging to black from the perspective of like getting immediately busted and attacked. The second system is F4, and that is so-called Austrian attack. This one is actually quite a bit more complicated and a fairly more dangerous. And here bishop d3 is played as well as bishop e2. What's the idea behind all this? Generally speaking, white does something like castling and then swings the queen to e1 and then to h4 and then tries to play f5. Usually, actually, this is the line where he, let's say you play c6 or something like that, and he castles, and then queen e1, and then queen h4, and then f5, and so on. So that's variation number 2. That's so-called Austrian attack, very sharp. Then there is always this system with bishop e3. For instance, some people play it this way: bishop e3, bishop g7, f3, kind of like Samish against King's Indian. Now, a very popular variation here, too. And here, white can play knight e2. Kasparov actually had a spectacular against Topolov that he won with this variation for white. Was like rook sack and stuff. So it was actually a great game.
Cool.
So a very interesting line to play for white and black, really.
Mm-hmm.
There's a variety of things. And there are a lot of players that actually had spectacular games against this variation. The biggest danger for black is to judge the danger that's coming, because you kind of have like this warm bath. You know, I've got this fianchetto set up and my king is safe.
Warm bath.
And you sometimes don't pay attention that this warm bath of yours is just about to be electrocuted. So you just want to make sure you don't do stupid stuff and don't ignore approaching pieces. This is the biggest problem that many class players fight. They ignore approaching pieces. Like opponent's pieces cross into their territory, one and then another one and then another one, and they're still doing something on the other side of the board, trying to do their own thing. So remember, when your opponent's pieces are approaching your position, you have to be on alert, and the best thing to deal with intruders is destroy them immediately after they come in, not after they gathered up and there's a bunch of them chasing you. So this game is by Larry Christensen and Jan Elvest. I've played Larry a couple of times. First time I played him in 1990 New York Open. I was up a pawn, but he beat me with a king's side attack in King's Indian defense. And second time, I beat him on a white side or a black side. I think it was actually a black side of Black Knight's Tango opening, where I actually sacked a queen and eventually won it back.
Cool. And you have a book about that, don't you? Don't you have a book? Don't you have a book about that? Black Knight's Tango?
Well, I had a book about Black Knight's Tango, yes. So I'm actually thinking if I ever retire, I'm going to write an update of the book.
Oh, cool.
Or maybe I could just do some series in a book, because it's actually been quite a popular book and sold a lot of copies. So a lot of people play it. It's really a lot of fun. So let's see what Larry does. Larry actually is a very, very strong chess player. In the 1980s, he was probably top 2 or top 3 American players. He wrote some attacking books about his games. He was in U.S. championships for many years, and he still, I think, plays fairly regularly. He has his own program, I guess, on Internet Chess Club. I think Attack with Larry C. So Larry is,
I think I've seen that.
Is a well-known and very feared opponent. So when he plays white, he usually goes for it. He doesn't really take prisoners. He just goes for checkmate. And that's what he did in this game. He played actually knight f3, bishop g7, and then he spices it up with bishop e3. Let's see, where is that in the game here? Larry.
You'll find it. I believe in you. It's got to be in there.
Yes. I actually know. I know that.
Wait, I think I see it. Here, let me click. There.
Yeah, bishop e3. Yes. Now, from what I remember about Pirc's defense, this move has never really gathered gigantic following. It is some sort of like a indie line, a specialty line where some people play it. Now, top Pirc players basically say that this is really not that dangerous because you can play knight g4, challenge the bishop. There is no pawn on g4 that ever coming up to support h4, h5. So it's not as dangerous as f3 system. But again, Larry has always been playing his own things, and he has his own analysis. So if he plays the system for white, then there's some attacking possibilities he can bet on that. So here he plays queen d2. His opponent plays c6, and Larry plays bishop d3. And black actually plays b5. Now, at this moment, everything is more or less normal and not at all unusual. And here Larry is beginning his bishop h6 attack. The idea is actually very standard, meaning that it's actually executed consistently in these kinds of positions. In order to checkmate the king, you have to trade the bishop on g7. So bishop h6 is a very common play. And here, Elvest, who himself is actually a really well-known player and was probably in top 10 back in the 1980s and 1990s, played in a World Cup and things like that, and candidates matches. Here plays the move that's actually very uncharacteristic for him. He plays queen c7, I was struggling to actually even think what this move does. I was thinking maybe he's preparing, in case of e5, he's preparing to take on e5 and play knight g4, attack e5 pawn. Maybe he wants to have, after e4, e5, d takes e5, d takes e5, have the d file open that he can counter with the rook. But the move really does not feel Pirc. You can't play Pirc like this. When your king is beginning to be attacked here, you really need to take action. You need to understand that these guys are coming. So the better defense would have been bishop g4. And what's the idea behind bishop g4, Ryan? What do you think?
To go bishop g4, well, just to add some defenders over there to the king side. I was just going to say that usually in the Pirc you have that kind of flexibility where you can play these like otherwise strange looking moves. I mean, black played b5, that wasn't a bad move. Now that bishop g4 is a much more standard looking move, but c6 earlier, there's a lot of room usually to be flexible. So it's kind of surprising that queen c7 move is bad. But that's what brings it back to your metaphor earlier about like getting electrocuted in like a warm bathtub, which I really like that metaphor. I feel like that's sort of usable. I feel like I could use that in my own games a little bit. So good stuff. But bishop g4, am I right? Is it just to kind of generally bring some pieces over there?
Well, you basically need to kind of make a fewer attackers in front of you. You basically want to take on f3 at some point because queen alone is not going to do that much damage, or queen and an h pawn. But if the queen gets there near the king and the knight joins that, that might actually be problematic for you. Let's say he goes here, queenside castle. You can take, and play knight d7, f4, e5. So steal a position that's actually probably fairly dangerous, but at least playable. Because there's no knight on f3. The number of pieces available to attack the king obviously is not as big. So that's what I would suggest to play for black. But I was playing queen c7. Like I said, this move is what I would say very slow. It doesn't really attack anything. It doesn't approach anything. It sort of like passes the ball back.
So what you're saying is that just bringing a piece that's sort of average and just not developed yet for a piece that's attacking is sort of the idea, and then also to control like e5.
Well, to fight for the square e5, to terminate the attacker on f3, but also nobody actually canceled the good old-fashioned development motto. You got to develop your pieces.
Sure, yeah.
You can't really just operate with half the pieces on the back. If you look at white pieces, he just needs one move, either castle short side or long side, and fully deployed. Whereas black still has to work on that. That bishop g4 move actually fits that really well. Whereas queen c7 does not. So here Larry basically immediately takes charge. He takes on g7. And after the king takes, plays e5. So at this moment here, Elvis, who I actually respect a great deal, and I know him personally, I played him in speed chess a few times, and here he actually demonstrated a remarkable, I would say disregard to opponent's threats. He basically maybe didn't think much of them and didn't think anything really serious coming up. He just basically plays knight d7. So if you look at the position, black pieces are sort of slowly retreating. And that's not the way to play Pirc. In Pirc, if you start playing that and you lose a lot of space, you really just end up frequently just ambushed right away. So what he should have done, he probably at least should have traded on e5 and then conceivably played knight g4, keeping the diagonal open, the c8 diagonal. And then let's say queen goes to f4, knight a6, h3, knight h6. Again, knight is not in a very exciting position on h6 by all means, but it does provide the king with a bit of a support. And on the next move, we can play knight c5. So the bishop on d3 is going to be under observation. And then the b pawn can start going potentially. So I think in this position, if you run the stockfish fellow, the stockfish is still giving white a lead, and sizable one at that, but I don't think it's an immediate win. It says h4, knight c5, h5 was a good attack. Agree. I'm not going to argue this. So still a better position. I said queen c7 kind of already set him up on a bad road.
That's a tough call to say that the knight should go over to g4 and allow white this tempo to sideline the knight. That does not seem like an easy call.
No, it's not. And in fact, Stockfish actually suggests a pawn sack or going knight g8. So this is what the Stockfish suggests. Basically play knight d5 and give up the pawn.
Yep.
But that way, even though you lost the pawn, you win a little bit of time to develop your pieces finally. Like maybe play something like bishop d7, and the bishop takes d7. Possibly knight takes d7, another sack. Now, if you take on d5, the c2 pawn is actually a little bit under attack. And here you can actually get counterattack really quickly. But still, even here, computer favors white. So queen c7, I think, was a fairly large mistake.
And then it seems like he just sort of lost the thread of the game there.
Yes, yes. He kind of basically started very actively b5, but after that sort of slumped in his chair and did nothing. So in this position here, after e5, knight of d7, Larry starts storming the barricades. Actually, that's the name of his book. He goes h4. Now, looks like a pawn sack that was accepted. H5 actually would have been a better move, it looks like. Oh, no, actually, no. Actually, d takes e5, then h5 would probably be winning. If you think about this, the computer says 7-point lead. Ouch, that looks like a checkmate to me.
Yeah.
Now you've got h takes g6 and queen h6 mate. So that's the idea here of this whole e5 routine.
Yeah, if you can capture a pawn in the center, that's great. But if your opponent gets a checkmate you right after, that's not a trade that you want to do, that's for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So here Elvis played h5 because taking on e5 would lose. And here Larry plays a standard sack.
Nice.
And if you actually look at this position, it's already quite bad. Why is that? Well, can you actually take the pawn? Yes, but after queen g5, you suddenly see that all your pieces kind of bunched up on the queen side while the king is getting executed.
Oh, interesting. Bishop takes g6
is a really nice touch because now if you take on g6, now your king is going to be fighting this war very much alone. If you look at this position here, it's kind of like a screaming disaster. You got all the pieces in the back row on the side, and your king is facing a queen and a pawn and rook on h5 coming up. So this is obviously a position where you can't really last more than just a few moves.
Right. Came over there.
And here, queen f6 and checkmate.
Well, that's an interesting touch, that the bishop takes g6, because I thought you were going to say knight e4 there. Yeah, checkmate, yeah. And then I was thinking, if you go knight to e4, yeah, back on move like 14, then it seemed like black had some compensation. Rook f6, knight e4, and then this is still actually
you can actually do a knight f8.
Yeah.
It's still going to be a bad position, though.
Still going to be a bad position.
Here is in a bad position.
Well, no, but
it's just a bad position, period.
But I mean, to my credit, now you have to go here. If you instead go like this, then black kind of has this wall of pawns and is putting up a good fight. So it's much more effective to earlier on just go for this. That sort of leaves an impression that's interesting. Not settling for this move, trying to win the exchange, but saying, my goal is to checkmate the king. Let's pursue that directly.
Right, this is actually typical Larry attack. He basically throws the kitchen sink in you.
Yeah.
If you don't catch it, you lose.
Yeah.
So this is a remarkable disaster. Just basically in 12 moves, the game is practically lost. If you actually look at this position, the Stockfish gives white pretty much a rook advantage, even though he hasn't even won a pawn. So here Ellis already in a very bad shape and doesn't really have much that he can do to save the game. So he actually played knight of 6.
And also
trying to get some defense there.
To connect it back to the bishop g4 idea, like neutralizing this knight, that'd be huge, because in a lot of those lines, it was the addition of the knight coming to like g5. There was a difference between that sack being good or bad, So just one more point of evidence that you got to try to sometimes just neutralize their attackers before it's too late.
Yes, that's basically, I always say, fight the intruders before they're going to become many of them in front of you. If you've got 1 or 2, you can deal with it. If you got 3 or 4, that's usually too late. So here Elvis is basically lost. So I think he played knight of 6, and Larry won this game and a few more moves. Let me look at this real quick. So what exactly did he do? Gosh, knight of 6, e takes f7. So queen g5 is coming up. Knight h7 to stop the queen's arrival. Knight g5 anyway. Knight f6 again, trying not to let the queen in front. And here, just simple castling. Knight a6, knight e2. Black resigns.
He's getting overrun.
That's it. Knight g4 can be played, but then knight goes to f4. If you play bishop f5, bishop takes f5, and knight e6 check. You cannot play knight b4, queen takes b4. So the next move is knight f4. Knight f4 that's going to threaten you. Knight takes
you say
g6
b4, queen takes b4?
No, knight b4.
Knight b4. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, knight b4, that's protected. So really an opening disaster. Really an opening catastrophe. I'm surprised that this was such a short game, because I know Elvis is really spectacularly good player, but in this case, he simply underestimated the attack.
Cool stuff. What a knockout, and super instructional to see kind of just, you know, how just a minor looking mistake like this, and then not seeing this can be just immediately decisive game.
Actually, I'm come to think of it, I'm trying to go through this notes here. I've got lots of notes written up. I think I may have made a mistake here. There's also another line, bishop e6 here, that's possible. Knight g5, bishop f7, rook h3, d4, knight e2, e5, rook g3. I don't think that was played in the game. That's just a sub variation.
Okay.
So you can see here that the game really didn't have a chance to develop for black. Once black surrendered the center and did not develop enough pieces to fight back, he was just immediately demolished. So if you actually go back to the position, you see where he was decisive mistake. A lot of times in this situation, it really sort of pays to establish some sort of presence in the center as soon as possible. Like here, what would be a move that I would play? I would suggest in this position something like c6. I think is fine. I don't really have any problem here. But after bishop d3, I would definitely consider the bishop g4 or knight bd7. Because the idea here is to actually play e5. And let's say if you play bishop h6 and I play e5, you can see here that there really is no way to chase the knight from f6 here, for instance, anytime soon.
Right.
Plus, black develops play with queen b6, and later b7, b5 is possible as well. So you can see that in this position, a computer's values the position as equal. So
but why would I put a bishop, a pawn on e5? That's going to block in my bishop. That's unthinkable.
Well, it's true, but bishop is departing.
Yeah.
Bishop is departing. Actually, good point. A lot of times you don't do this, but bishop is departing. And you're actually setting up a fight in the center that's going to prevent opponent's pieces grabbing so much space. So you can see how weak the queen c7 move was. It was actually the move that pretty much allowed white to win the game by a quick march of pawns. So let's take a look at the next game here.
Let's do it.
The next game is between Arthur Squire and Bent Larson, also legendary players of the past. Both passed away some time ago. Bent Larson was world #1. He played in the World versus USSR match as board 1 player against Boris Spassky, who was a world chess champion at the time. So he was ahead of Bobby Fischer in that match on the world team, which kind of tells you how strong he was. That match was in 1970. In 1972, Bobby Fischer destroyed him in a match 6-0.
Man.
And after that, Bent Larson really never recovered. It was such a blow that he just simply could not recover. His career went downhill after that. He was really a great player in late 60s, mid 60s to late 60s. He was actually one of the dominating players in the world circuit, won many chess tournaments, played for Denmark chess team, and by himself, just by his presence frequently, made a difference in matches.
Sounds like we
In
got
this
we got to
game,
see a Fischer game at some point.
oh yeah, we definitely will. So in this position here, in this opening again, he actually played this from a slightly different move order, which we call in chess transposition. So here, Arthur de Squire plays f4, and he goes for an Austrian attack system. I actually looked at this position from time to time. I would play d5 here just for fun. I'd play d5 here because if the pawn takes, queen takes, you can kind of see that the pawn on f4 is not particularly a great presence. It blocks the bishop, and it doesn't really particularly does anything super exciting.
No, wait a second. I've been told you can't bring out your queen too early. I'm gonna attack your queen. I'm gonna go knight c3.
Well, the pawn on d4 is hanging, so that probably plays into my favor.
Okay, but let's say I go bishop e3 and then I go here.
Interesting idea. Interesting idea. I don't know what I would do immediately. I would be thinking of something like either knight f6 or knight h6 or knight c6. I would say this move probably, knight c6. So you're going to go knight c3.
Yes.
And if you do that, you have to contend with that move.
Kind of typical in the Scandinavian too. When you bring out your queen to d5 and then it jets over to a5.
Oh yeah, it's actually almost like a subversion of Scandinavian. A little bit a weird one, but nevertheless playable. And then what do you do here? Let's say you play d5, try to go aggressive on this guy. Well, he's going to play knight d4, and then you can't play a3 because he's going to take on d5. Look at that spectacular little pin.
Nice, nice.
Can you take on d5 with the knight? No. Can you take with the queen? No. And that would be like a way no.
Yeah. Remove the defender, take out the queen, yeah. So generally not good to bring out your queen, but if you have a way, to escape, it's kind of a cool maneuver just going to a5. That's sort of one of the rare squares early on that's actually going to be generally safe from a lot of the minor pieces.
Well, that's true. Actually, you'd be surprised how many top players try Scandinavian in recent years. Like Kramnik started playing Scandinavian. When I saw the first games that he played against Scandinavian, my eyes just basically popped out. What? Kramnik plays Scandinavian? Yeah. But he actually played it. Although he played an obscure line, Queen d6 there. And there's a few more grandmasters tried it. I personally feel like Scandinavian, even for Kramnik, as top a player as he was, he kind of struggled there.
Mm.
I would characterize it as like semi-sound opening, like not 100% sound, but under some circumstances and against certain players probably may work.
Oh, I understand. I didn't know it was that dubious.
But if it's dubious, super dubious, but I would say it's extremely risky opening.
If it's dubious, then why would you play it? You played a Scandinavian-like idea. What was up with that?
Well, f4 just doesn't fit. It really just does not fit. There's many situations there where this move is just, if you had a knight on f3 instead of pawn on f4, I would never go that route. But here, that f4 move gives me that opening, that extra edge that I need to pull that trick off.
Kind of interesting that sometimes unusual moves can be met then by unusual moves in return.
That's right. That's a good point. So here, d5 is kind of risky, but Larson played d6, and Squire plays knight f3. And Squire was an American player, a very capable player in the 1960s. I mean, if he defeated Larson, you can kind of see how strong he was, because in the 1960s, Larson was really up-and-coming player and winning many tournaments. So here he plays a variation of the Austrian attack, but not quite the Austrian attack, because the Austrian attack usually goes like this. And Squire plays bishop d3 instead. And after castles, he castles as well. Now, in this position, it's very important to understand that if you're playing black, again, you have to be aware that these guys are just about to make a run at you. Either f4, f5 is going to go up, or e4, e5 is going to go up. So you really need to prepare your counterplay early. For instance, one of the ideas here is to play knight c6. Again, a developing move, very important. And if pawn goes to c3, then d5, with the idea of meeting e5 with knight e4. The computer actually favors this for white. So maybe the idea is not as winning as one would think, but at least I think it's an interesting play. Definitely playable for black. Another move I'm thinking about is c5. Again, sort of taking charge and immediately creating some positional counterplay. And now white needs to decide, does he want to take on c5? Does he want to play c3? Does he want to play d5? So there's a variety of things to think about.
And so, as you guys can see, you know, the viewers watching this and everything, like I said, is one of my main points about the Pirc is there is so much flexibility. Like this pawn can go here or here. This pawn can go like this. You know, knight can come in like this and this. We saw one kind of obscure example where the queen doesn't have the freedom of going right here. But for the most part, there's just a lot of choice about, you know, different ways that you can pursue these different things. And, you know, as Jurgi is outlining, these are some of the examples, you know. So, you know, despite these games highlighting how you can beat the Pirc, if you're interested in trying something different against e4, I'd say go for it, you know. Try out the Pirc for a bit and see if it's for you. That being said, we're going to continue this example of how to smash the Pirc like a bug.
That's right. So here, Mr.
Kids love
Larson
that, by the way.
plays knight b to d7.
Yeah. Okay.
Knight b to d7. Now, the danger of this move is always the same. Whenever you block this bishop, you have to pay attention to the pawn run-up, because there's always a chance of e5, e6, and then knight g5, and so on. So you have to be very careful here. And again, the computer likes e5 best in this position. And Larson plays knight e8 and queen e1. This is a very standard idea, the swing of the queen to h4. Just remember this. What's the plan? The plan is to play queen h4 and then possibly knight g5. Or maybe queen h4 and then shove the pawn to e6, and after f takes e6, knight g5 attacks e6 and h7. Or play queen h4, f4, f5, and then bishop h6. So this is a very tricky attack that you really have to be paying attention to and be very mindful of. And again, what should black do? Again, always active counterplay is the key. So I would immediately go with c5. Now, what's the idea of this move? To demolish white's center as soon as possible. And now the computer likes knight g5 for white. The idea of that move is usually to play e6 to completely destroy the defense. And then h6, knight takes f7,
whoa,
rook takes f7, bishop takes g6, rook f8. According to Stockfish, there's about half a point lead. Very dangerous attack, but you do sack material. And every time you do sack material, you obviously need to be aware. Unless you checkmated somebody, you're down material. So I think c5 here would have been the move that would allow queen to have some freedom. It's very important if you actually think about this way. What is black doing? Is black trying to destroy the pawn center? If the answer is no, it's only a matter of time before opponent's queen is going to come to h4 and the f pawn is going to go up. Now, what is black's queen doing against all this? The answer at this point in time, absolutely nothing. So not a great idea not to use your best piece for defense. And c5, what does that move do for the queen? It allows the queen to come out to b6 for a change. So it's actually quite an achievement in its own right, bringing the queen into the game. So he played knight e8.
But why do we bring in the queen in the game this way? The king's this way. Why are we going for the queen side? Or why should he have been going for the queen side?
Well, we're coming to b6 to actually attack the center. We're not attacking the queen side. We're attacking d4 because that's where the king is.
Ah, okay. So you do want to go here to b6, so you're actually on the diagonal against the king here.
That's right. And I'm also kind of overlooking b2 since I got a bishop on g7 and the queen comes to b6. I attack d4, all kinds of pins, d takes e5, and all of that business. So everything kind of comes together here.
Because that's what I noticed on the next move. He plays f5, so it seems like he kind of picked the wrong side of the board. That's a huge part of picking your plan is, do you want to go in the center, the queen side, or the king side? And so he kind of chose wrong. He was hoping to just sort of bottle it up on the king side, lock things down, and then go back to his own measures. But so much more important in the Pirc to counterattack, something that I'm learning.
That's correct. And he actually played c5 here. So this move is actually not bad. And the computer liked knight g5 best here with a potential sack on f7. But
oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. White plays f5. My bad. Sorry,
White
please
plays
continue.
f5. White plays f5. So Squire plays f5. Does he care about g takes f5? Absolutely not. He'd be thrilled if somebody took on f5. In that case, you can just simply go probably queen h4, threatening knight g5, or take on f5. Doesn't really matter. So here, d takes e5 is played. Now, this is actually a little bit of a trap, because in a way, f5 burns bridges for white, because white can't really take on e5 back. Why is that? Because of a sudden countersack.
Ooh.
And then this check was a double attack against the king and the knight on e5. And suddenly your attacking forces are getting terminated. So when Squire played f5, he must have calculated at that point already that he's kind of committing to going for it without looking back. So he goes f takes g6, h takes g6, and queen h4. Now you see that he's getting ready to go knight g5 to win the game. So right now, right here, what should black do? Obviously, he needs to bring the knight to f6. That's more or less required. But which knight is always a big question. What he should have done is knight d to f6. That would have been the better move. So first, actually, the capture
take first,
d4,
and then later, yeah.
Then bishop h6, and then knight e to f6 was played. That turned out to be a losing move. But he should have played knight d to f6. Now, the big difference is this. Now, first of all, queen and bishop both have some opening, and that's the critical part. So what's the big difference between this two? After e takes f6, e goes to f6. You can see the bishop on c8 is what?
Blocked. A dud, yeah.
And what about queen on d8?
Also a dud.
Blocked. So two really powerful pieces that you can use for defense are blocked. Yes, the knight on d7 controls e5 square, but that's not the square that needs to be controlled. So after knight d to f6, knight g5 would probably follow, and then he has a move, queen d5, and that's a critical move that makes a huge difference. Why is that? Let's say you go knight d2, then bishop can go to f5, and at least the rook is neutralized. Not entirely, and it's going to try to come back from g3 or h3, but with a knight on e8, g7 is immediately protected by the knight and king. And here, this is still going to be a very bad position, but in the game, he lost even faster. I don't know, maybe bishop f5 is not a good move. Maybe you can do better by bishop g4. That's what the computer recommends, bishop g4. What's the big idea?
To go to h5?
To provoke the pawn to go to h3, and then you can go to f5. And the difference is that after rook f3, the rook cannot come to h3.
Oh, okay.
So he's basically tricking him. But at any rate, what's the big difference that you kind of immediately observe between the two knight moves? After knight e to f6, none of that is even remotely possible. No queen in the game, no bishop in defense. So two biggest pieces that you could use for defense no longer possible. And the game pretty much ends in a few. Knight goes to g5. And here his last defensive chance was to play queen e8, maintaining defense of f7 and g6 squares. Instead, I think he got a little bit too optimistic, and he played knight e5. I am not obviously familiar with his thinking at the moment. He probably calculated this tricky line. He thought, if this guy takes here, I take him back, and he takes here, I take with a king. And he does not have a checkmate.
Sounds reasonable thinking enough, at least.
Yeah, you go knight h7, it goes back to g7. You don't have anything. If you go to e6, obviously you can simply take the king. You can play knight d2. This would still be a very dangerous position by all means.
And that's clearly why he delayed moving the d knight. He was thinking, I'm going to move the d knight to e5 later.
Yes, obviously he had some calculations here. He probably thought that he'd be able to survive this position. I don't know if he was able to calculate it or not. The king kind of marches on and kind of laughs at everybody. I think this is just one of those positions that I personally would not go this way if I was black, and I wouldn't even consider it because I guess I would be a chicken. How can I possibly survive this mess? This looks horrible. I'm going to get checkmated. But Larson was a fearless player. He absolutely was not afraid of anything. And my guess is that's what he calculated, and that's why he played what he played. But he actually missed what Squire's calculation was. Well, Squire actually took there.
Doing it now, yeah.
And what's the big difference? Well, the big difference actually that after this move, White has a spectacular trick.
Whoa.
It puts the bishop under 2 attacks, and the knight can be captured, but there are 2 mates, h8 and h7. So suddenly there are too much to protect and not enough pieces to do it with.
Interesting. I've seen that before.
So a very nice sack. Now, so what did Larson do? Larson plays bishop h8.
Well, for the viewers, you might as well look at that one more time because I can connect the dots to see what you're saying, but probably be good to show them exactly what you mean. Let's see here. So it was here, right? And then he goes this way, seeing that he should not go here because of this. Can you walk us through that one more time? Why is that a good move?
Well, he actually threatened mate on h7 and h8 at the same time. So let's say the knight dies, the queen wins by h8 mate. And if the king takes the bishop, then you checkmate on h7.
Cool.
So there is no way to protect 2 squares, h7 and h8. You can protect each one individually, but not both.
Cool. Thank you.
So that's where the oversight was, I'm guessing. So he actually played bishop h8, avoiding that. And in this position, I think White actually has a couple of different ways to win. But Larson actually went back to, Squire went back to f1, saving his rook and actually now threatening to take on f8. And rook went to e8. And in this position, White is already up a piece. So I'm thinking that here he can probably win several different ways. Like I've looked at this position. I like knight takes f7. Knight takes f7, bishop g6. Can White really not win this? It just doesn't look
That
defensive.
looks really good, yeah.
That looks really good. I actually thought that this was a very simple way to win, but Squire actually calculated tricky stuff. He goes here instead.
Ooh.
He sacks the bishop, and now what does he threaten?
Queen h7 and queen h8.
Exactly. So the bishop goes to f6, and now the pesky rook comes back. Round trip.
Still here.
Round trip.
Yeah.
It takes at f6, and now seemingly e takes f6 actually holds the line, because if you go queen h7, he takes on f8, and he threatens to take the knight on g5. And this is probably the move. I don't know if he actually saw this far, Larson, that is, but if he did, he probably missed this one.
Oh, is that the only move there?
I'm not sure, but this is the most beautiful one for sure.
Look at that. Wow.
It's kind of a blocking move. He's not letting the king to take the bishop that it needs to take to run away. And if the rook takes it, then the mate on h7 is still there, just like always.
Interesting.
And if you take the knight on g5, then queen g7 kills him anyway.
Interesting.
So here I can probably survive a few more moves by maybe doing something silly like this, and then rook e1 check. and then maybe another check or two. But in the big scheme of things, it doesn't really change the outcome. You still cannot get rid of this threat of
It's a
queen
forced mate,
g7,
yeah.
and it's a forced mate. So you
Cool
can look at
stuff.
this position and see how beautiful that was. I really enjoyed the rook round trip.
Yeah.
Like I said, there was probably more than one way to win, and I'm almost sure that here, Squire really enjoyed himself
Yeah.
looking at this position because practically no matter what he does, he wins.
Oh boy, you're popular.
Yes, I am. So you can see in this position that what a big mistake that was to remove the wrong knight. So if you put the knight on f6, actually allow your bishop and your queen to participate in defense. If you put your e knight to f6, the queen and bishop stay away just long enough for you to get in trouble.
Right, right. Cool
So
stuff. This was super interesting.
How things turned out for him.
Yeah, very cool. All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed that. If you'd like us to cover this kind of theme of a miniature and like quick attack in a different opening, let us know. But probably for next week, I'm thinking we'll do another game of the Pirc with the Z. Right? Is that how you say it?
Yes, the Pirc defense. We're going to
Pirc.
review another Pirc, but maybe in this time review some good example for black play.
Yeah.
And there's a famous game that was played quite a few years ago. I was actually in the audience during that game. It was one of the games that Anatoly Karpov lost with white against, at the time, a young chess master. It was quite a sensation. At that time, he wasn't really losing that many games at all. And it is always interesting to see when somebody like Karpov loses to a younger player. And it was actually at the time when Karpov was in his peak years. It wasn't a little bit later in his career. It was at the time when he was actually pretty good. We could see how black played well in that game and what ideas he deployed. He actually played very actively. The big difference being these two games we reviewed, black suffered from the same thing. He deployed too slow and was not very proactive, allowed white to dominate the middle, push the knights away, and launch the large number of pieces against themselves.
But as you guys can tell, those of you listening, we're never going to run out of games. He's got lots and lots of games. These are some of the most exciting ones too, and so we definitely try to make it really interesting for you guys. And we'll never have a problem with running out of games. There's millions and millions of games to look at, and lots of good ones to show. So lots and lots more videos to come.
Chess has just millions of interesting games, and these are great miniatures by actually top players, not just.
And that'll do it for today's video. Please like and subscribe, and you can also check out these other videos that are hopefully around me in my head, but I don't know how to do it, so it might not be there, but hopefully it is.